Hello everybody, Jezza here from Happy Apple Productions. Some of you may know me as Skylike from Muvizu.com. We are the creators of Tales from Zombie Town. I'm here today to do a tutorial for you in respect to the new functions and features that we get with the Muvizu Play Plus cameras. For those of you who haven't been keeping up to date, Muvizu have been through a lot of changes over the past year, and with those changes we have new functions, new features and a new layout. So more toys for us to play with. This will be a little bit more of an advanced tutorial. If you are looking for a more basic tutorial, by all means check out Jamie on Muvizu.com or Cerebral Dump on YouTube. His tutorial videos range from the very first time that you get Muvizu and download it to the first time you open it to making your own feature film. It has lots of tips and tricks, and this man knows exactly what he's talking about when it comes to all the features and functions of Muvizu. That being said, as well, Ziggy on the Muvizu.com website also has some fantastic tutorials with some really good tips and tricks for you budding little filmmakers out there. So without further ado, let's get into it. Okay, so as you can see today, we're going to be using Dre from Tales from Zombie Town. Very simple spooky background and a couple of cameras to show the functions and the features off. We don't need to go into anything too technical as far as the set's concerned. This will be more than adequate. The first thing that we're going to go through today is our camera windows. The camera window has been changed, so to bring up the camera window we go to View, Show Camera Window, and up pops our camera window. Now the first thing that you'll notice on the new camera window is that we actually have a slider. Now the slider is able to allows us to adjust the camera windows to a larger size so that we can get a little bit more detail out of it, or bring it in a little bit smaller so that we can have a little bit more room within our scene. Now I prefer to work with a bigger camera window so that I can see more detail and see exactly what the camera is seeing at the time. Now, the two tabs at the top of the camera window box, you'll notice is all or active. Now at the moment we clicked on all, so we can see camera 1 and camera 2 and see exactly what they're going to be looking at. If we click on the active screen, we're going to be seeing the active camera at that point in time in the scene. At this point we haven't put in a camera cut, so we're only using camera 1. But as you can see, this is a great new function and does allow for a lot of experimentation and allows you to get a more accurate view of what you're doing within your scene. Okay, now we're going to look at some of the features that the Muvizu Play Plus cameras give us. As you can see here, we're only going to be using one camera, but any adjustments that I do make to this camera will show up in the preview screen over here, so keep an eye out on the preview screen. First thing we're going to do is right click on the camera, which brings up a new convenient pop-up menu, which previously wasn't there. This has everything that you will need to use and control your camera and edit your camera, which can also be found up in the top bar. So what we're going to be looking at today is the edit box. So if I click on this tab, it'll bring up the edit box for camera 1. So camera 1 has a lot of options. The first thing that you'll see is that you can actually rename your camera. This has a practical use, not just for naming a camera and calling it, say for instance, Bob. But let's say for instance Bob was a very technical camera and it took us a long time to set up, and that he had a lot of effects and overlays put over the top of it. And we don't want to have to recreate that camera again. We can rename it to something that is familiar to us, then save it in the favorites so that next time we don't have to recreate that camera. We just double click on it and boom, Bob would appear. Now, the first slider that we have in the menu is our field of view slider. This sometimes gets confused as a zoom. It's probably the most impractical way of zooming and isn't very accurate at all. It is designed to give you more or less in your particular frame, okay, and what your camera sees. So if you want your camera to see more, you increase the field of view. If you wanted to see less, we bring the field of view back in again. Okay, so we will go into zooming and tips about zooming in the next part of the tutorial. So the first tab that we have is the focus tab. Now the effect that we get is the blur effect, okay? Now this gives us the focus, distance and depth of field. When we click on it, you'll notice the two sliders pop up. When those sliders pop up, we now have the ability to adjust our depth of field and our focus distance as much or as little as we want. The practical use to this that we use it for, we use these to knock out the detail in backgrounds. If the background doesn't seem to suit the scene, but we need to use that particular background, you can knock out the detail, give it a little bit of depth of field, and now all of a sudden the character appears to be in that scene as opposed to just standing in front of a backdrop. The next tab that we have is the color tab. The base effect at the moment that we're using is nil, none, sorry. But if we click on the pop-down menu, you'll notice that we have black and white. We also have a sepia color wash. We have a color tint, negative, horizontal flip, and a vertical flip. Now, black and white is pretty self-explanatory. The sepia color wash, when you do pick it, you will notice that a color tab comes up here, and we have the ability to click within this box. When you do see this color tab come up and click within the box, the palette will come up. Now, the palette allows you to adjust it to whatever color you feel you need for your scene. This is very helpful and very practical. Worst case scenario, if all else fails and everything looks terrible, click that reset button and everything goes back to normal. The difference between the sepia and color wash and the color tint is that when we click on color tint, one, we will still get the palette, the ability to access the palette, but now we also have a slider for the intensity, how much or how little we want this to tint our lens. So this has more of an overall practical use. We would probably use color tint more than we would probably use the sepia color wash, but that's just us. If you need it, it's there. It's an ability that is there for you. The next one on the tab is the negative, which obviously will turn everything negative. There is no control over it. It will just purely turn whatever it's looking at into a negative image. We don't use it. I can understand why now, because Dre looks very funky. Next one, horizontal flip, flips the entire image horizontally, and the vertical flip, which will flip the entire image vertically. So now that we've gone through the colors, we can go through the overlays. Now the overlay effects are very clever. Overlay effects you would normally only ever find in post-editing software. Normally quite expensive post-editing software. But with Muvizu, of course, we're given it as part of the software. It's just another one of those wonderful things that they do for us. The very first one off the on the menu is our old film, and when you click on old film, as you can see, everything goes very granulated. You get a grainy overtone and an intensity slider, so that you can still adjust the intensity. If you don't want any of it in there, you don't have to have any of it in there, and if you want it a lot, you can put in a lot. The next one is the image overlay. Image overlay is a very clever way of doing things. As you can see here, the automatic defaulted one happens to be binoculars. As you can see here, or if you couldn't work it out yourself, this is actually a PNG image or a ping image. Anything that the camera wants to see will be translucent, and anything you don't want the camera to see will become an outline. So, for example, if we click on the actual image itself, it brings up the texture box. Texture box allows us to have backgrounds, textures to the characters, costumes, etc., etc. But for this example, we're going to be using the camera overlays. So we click on the camera overlays, and as you can see, we get 4 default templates to use. First one being the smaller binoculars, wider binoculars, smaller sniper rifle, and the wider sniper rifle scope. So as you can see, this internal area is all transparent, the external is all black, and the lines and the numbers have been put in. So as you can see, anything that's transparent, the camera will still see through. Very, very clever. Okay, we're resetting. Once again, if you can make your own PNG image as well, or ping image, however you want to say it, once you click on your texture box, you can import any of the overlays that you happen to make yourself, can be directly imported and placed directly over the camera. So the next one that we're going to use is the underwater. Now, as you can see, if I bring up the intensity here, you may not be able to tell, but you can see the ripple effect going over the front of Dre's face at the moment. It's exactly what it is. It's an underwater effect. It makes the character appear as if they're underwater. CCTV. Okay, CCTV, as you can see, it gives us a gamma ray that will distort the image and distort the front of the camera. My tip for this one is that if you happen to have the TV camera overlay on, use one of the colors, preferably and usually green. Some sort of green will give it more of an actual CCTV look, right? Post-editing, adding in timelines and title and some form of text down the bottom is also another great way to make it appear as if it actually is a CCTV camera. Now, pixelated, which will turn the entire character and the entire scene pixelated, gives it a pixelated look. It has an adjustment, so once again, minor pixelation, full pixelation, completely out of it. Purely up to you, and with the sliders, you can pretty much do whatever you want to do with it, play around with it, see what effects you can get out of it. Now, this is a very clever one, which is the camera shake. Depending on the intensity that you want, once again, we get a slider. You can either have the camera shaking at full ball, as if we're in a 10 plus Richter scale earthquake, or we can pull it back down again to just have a little bit of a camera shake in there. Practical use for this one is anytime you're running or want to have the camera appear like it's moving with the person, or you're taking it from the person's point of the first person point of view. Moving the camera and having a bit of camera shake in it gives it the appearance of the person actually holding the camera, or getting the point of view of the person who's running at that point in time. I hope that made sense. Resetting again. Once again, the last tab is our final adjustments tab, which is the final effect, which gives us everything that we would normally do on a home video camera. We can adjust the brightness, we can adjust the color, we can adjust the contrast. So pretty self-explanatory with the final adjustment. If you have your camera looking good in the first place, very rare that you'll go to the final adjustment to change anything, but at least the option is there for you. So that is our edit menu and the functions and the features that we get with the Muvizu Play cameras. Okay, now I'm going to share with you some tips and tricks that we use when we're making Tales from Zombie Town. Tip number 1, use multiple cameras in your scene. You've got 4 of them, so use them. Utilizing more cameras will always give you a more professional look and finish to your project, and it gives you more options for different camera angles, without having to physically move your camera every scene. Tip number 2 is to visualize your scene. Picturing how the scene will look and flow is very important, and having an idea of what you wish to achieve throughout the scene is important. So if you can visualize what the scene will look like, you'll have a better chance of achieving the look and the feel that you desire for your scene. Tip number 3, plan, plan, plan. It's very important to plan your camera and character movements. Although Muvizu does allow us to try again, it's better to have a clear idea of what you're trying to achieve, as trial and error is sometimes very time consuming with difficult scenes. The important things to plan are your character movements, where and when the character should move, your camera movements, how fast, how smooth, and where you want the camera to finish its movement, introduction of dialogue, and which character actions you wish to use during the scene. If these 3 things are planned before starting a scene, you'll find that the process becomes a lot smoother and a lot more time efficient. Now, we've been previously asked if we had any tips for getting a smooth camera movement. There's really only one rule to the camera movement, and that's try again until you get it right. Having an idea of how the camera should move throughout the scene is important too. Plan which buttons you have to hit to make the camera achieve this result. Once again, trial and error will always play a big part to this, but if you're familiar with Muvizu, you'll know that all the movements can be adjusted, meaning that if your camera doesn't stop where you want it to, you simply move the camera to the desired spot and replay the scene. This is how you accurately position and zoom your camera and get your characters to hit the spot that you want them to, as the characters work under the same principle. Smoothness of the camera is always dependent on how much or how little you use the smooth movement option. Finding a smoothness and a speed that you're comfortable controlling is trial and error, but by pre-planning the camera movement and adjusting the smoothness, you get a less jerky camera movement. We've been asked multiple times, how did we get the old classic look? Here you can see the 2 examples of the camera's features and overlays to achieve the desired results that we wanted. Here you can see the Tales from Zombie Town Friday the 13th special, which was a remake of Young Frankenstein, which we used the black and white color option as well as the old film overlay to give the true classic black and white effect. But just because it's old doesn't mean that it has to be black and white, as you can see from the Tales from Zombie Town Halloween special. Here we have a remake of Dracula Dead and Loving It, where we use the old film overlay but no color change. These subtle touches can make all the difference. Okay, so that wraps up the tutorial. Hopefully you took something away with you today, gained a little bit more knowledge. Hopefully I've enlightened you to a couple of things. If I have glossed over anything, or there is anything in particular that you did want to ask us about Tales from Zombie Town or anything that we do in regards to Muvizu, feel free to hit me up on the Muvizu.com website. Just look for the name Skylike and send me a personal message. I will get back to you as soon as I possibly can. That being said, thank you very much for watching, guys, and stay safe.
Happy Apple!